Module 31. Emboss Printing. Embossing and debossing are the processes of creating either raised or recessed relief images and designs in paper and other materials. An embossed pattern is raised against the background, while a debossed pattern is sunken into the surface of the material, but might protrude somewhat on the reverse back side. This technique is often used in combination with foil stamping, as embossing alerts the surface of the paper stock or this other substances by providing a three-dimensional or raised effect on selected areas. Two different kinds of dies are used to achieve this effect. The dies fit into each other, and that when the paper is pressed between them, the raised die forces the stock into the recessed areas of the other die and creates the embossed impressions. A specific level of pressure is applied to the dies in order to squeeze the fibers of the paper, which results in a permanently raised area in the paper. While making the dies, or when the dies are produced, a die maker engraves the desired image into several metal plates, which are the embossing dies for use on an embossing press. A thorough understanding of the process will enable a more successful result. Generally, embossing is the process most often employed to attract attention or convey a high-quality textural contrast in relation to the surrounding area of the paper stock. Time 420. The design to be printed has to be of the same dimension as the size of the block, that is 7 inches into 7 inches. Debossing is similar to embossing, but recesses the design rather than raising it. Rather than the paper being raised in specific areas, it is indented. The process involves applying pressure to the applying pressure to the front side of the substrate and forcing the material down from the surface. Although it is not as common as embossing, it is occasionally used to provide a different effect or appearance that fits a particular theme. Embossing and debossing on digitally printed application is an offline process which may add a significant cost to the job. Embossing is basically used to create a distinctive effect. The greatest concern and emphasis on the client's behalf should be placed on the outcome of the embossed effect. In order to achieve the best possible effect, it is important to understand the embossing process and the type of dies that are used for embossing. While the embossing process sounds simple, there are three major factors which have to be controlled and considered when practicing it. The three factors are time, 5, pressure, the intensity of the impact on the weight of the stock being embossed, heat, the ability to maintain a consistent level of heat for the best impression, die depth, the client's artwork or the engraver's efforts. The client's artwork or the engraver's efforts will initially determine the die depth. However, if by looking at the artwork it appears that an adjustment of the die depth may be necessary, the die may need to be retooled to achieve a greater depth. Most types of paper can be embossed. And size is not normally a consideration. Embossing without ink so that image is raised but no colored is called blind embossing. Embossing used in conjunction with ink so that the raised area is colored is called color register embossing. Embossing used in conjunction with foil stamping is called combination stamping or combo stamping. Embossing involves a separate stage in the production process after any varnishing and laminating. It requires a separate press run and is priced accordingly. In addition to being used as a design element, embossing can be used to improve the performance of paper products like napkins, diapers, and tissue papers. History has taught us many things, as it takes us back to the 15th century when printing truly began as a professional yet limited method. Printing yielded high costs and little resources. Very few people printed during that era except important documents or government documents. As time went on, the printing process evolved vastly with more businesses and entrepreneurs using printing machines for their marketing and advertisements. Shortly after printing developed worldwide, hot stamping plates were created to process personalized stationery including embossing, engraving, foil stamping, and blind stamping. Using these methods of personalizations stamp back to the early centuries of hand engraved leather and the ancient art of branding tattoos. These techniques applied heated ink to be pressed onto an object, skin, metal, or leather. This method of hot stamping process allows different materials to be personally hand engraved. Time 7:45. Draw the image chosen in a bold manner on the block with the help of etching needle or different tools with varying light pressure. More importantly, embossing and engraving of coins made using this technique even more acceptable. Metal engraved currencies led to the idea of embossing custom full-color business cards. Metal engraved currencies led to the idea of embossing custom full-color business cards. Coin currencies are ideally engraved with a symbolic image of an individual, while in retrospect, embossed business cards creates an appealing characteristic to customers. Embossing allows business to increase their level of acceptance with a more visually attractive business card. The art of embossing truly materialized in the early 19th century when printing services became more affordable and achievable to the average citizens. Smart and sway businessmen took the printing process by storm to create a memorable brand identity with embossed hot stamp printing. Embossing aids in creating a unique and individualized texturized 3D effect of any design, decoration on surfaces such as cardstock, metal, and paper. Engraving has been popularized more recently due to custom and embossed business cards. With such an elegant way to create a personalized stationery, anything one can customize with embossing turns to gold with. Embossing elevates the standard and quality of any stationery item, be it for a brand image or something special. Embossing also is used for producing raised pattern on the surface of metal, leather, textiles, and other similar substances. Strictly speaking, the term is applicable only to raised impression produced by means of engraved dies or plates. Crests, monograms, and addresses may be embossed on plates and envelopes from dies set either in small hand screw presses or in ordinary letter presses. Blocked ornaments on book covers or imitation tooling on leatherwork can be effected by means of powerful embossing presses. For impressing embossed patterns on wallpapers, textiles, and felt copper cylinders are engraved with the pattern to be raised. The cylinders press against rollers with yielding surfaces or with elevations and depressions corresponding in reverse to those on the cylinders. In regular printing or an engraving, plates are pressed against the surface to leave an imprint. In embossing, however, the pressing raises the surface, adding a new dimension to the object. Time 10:45. Embossing is an elegant process that changes the nature of the material that has been embossed. More often than not, it elevates the standard and quality of the product. A notary's embossed seal can give much weight to a regular piece of paper. Similarly, an embossed wedding card immediately changes the entire meaning conveyed by the invitation. Poor quality embossing can completely kill the appeal of an object. However, good quality embossing can make an object positively breathtaking. There are also many different kinds of embossing that can be done, like blind embossing, tint embossing, and glazing to achieve different results. The process of embossing is relatively inexpensive and has many issues. Embossing is used for aesthetic purposes as well as functional uses in industries. From embossing names on credit cards or embossed braille books for the blind, embossing has a wide range of applications and uses. Blind embossing is like a piece of fine sculpture. Blind embossing creates both visual and tactile appeal. It is especially effective when a subtly elegant three-dimensional image is desired. An embossed image is formed using male and female molds. Under extreme pressure, these two mold the paper to their shape, creating a multi-dimensional impression. When embossed, the image is raised. When debossed, the image is below the paper surface. Time 13:45. Embossing dies come in several different styles, each with its own unique appearance. A flat die creates a three-dimensional image that is raised above the paper surface. Since its edges are straight, it produces the most accurate reproduction of black and white line art. A round die creates a curved image curving out from the paper surface. Beveled embossing gives an image with sloping sides and allows a deeper impression. Sculpted dies create real dimension by forming the paper to several layers. The best embossing style for a given object will depend on the effect the designer wishes to achieve. Important consideration in blind embossing projects include the size, boldness, and intricacy of the design, as well as the bulk of paper stock to be used. In general, bolder type and larger designs can be embossed more deeply, and heavier papers can achieve greater depth and detail. Blind embossing basically flattens the paper in the embossed area, so it is always more effective on textured paper stocks or laid sheet where it creates a contrast in the paper surface. Time 15:45. To prepare the etchant, mix carefully 1 part nitric acid with 8 parts water in a plastic tray, or 1:8 proportion of the nitric acid, which has 60% purity. Line art and typography for embossing should be proofed at reproduction size. Care must be taken in spacing type so that letters have room to form. Because an embossed image is three-dimensional, it may appear slightly smaller than the same image. Because an embossed image is three-dimensional, it may appear slightly smaller than the same image produced by offset or other three-dimensional means. To compensate for this optical illusion, artwork may be prepared slightly bolder or at a slightly larger size. The style of embossing or the effect to be achieved should always be clearly specified with the artwork. Providing a side view of the desired image or a sample of the type of embossing desired is also useful to the die maker. Embossing can be successfully combined with other fine print reproduction techniques such as engraving, lithography, and foil stamping. Example: artist Robert Adams. Robert Adams was born in New Jersey in 1937 and moved to Colorado as a teenager. Adams was a professor of English literature for several years before turning his full attention to photography in the mid-1970s. His work is largely concerned with moments of regional transition, the suburbanization of Denver, a changing Los Angeles of the 1970s and 1980s, and the clear cutting in Oregon in the 1990s. His many books, well known of those concerned with the American landscape include The New West, From the Missouri West, Summer Nights, Los Angeles Spring, To Make It Home, Listening to the River, West from the Columbia, What We Bought, Notes, for Friends, California, Summer Nights, Walking, Gone. What can we believe where? What can we believe where? And the place we live. Time 2010. The block is now to be etched using a nitric acid solution. This is the etchant solution. Time 2020. The back side of the block to be etched is first covered with an acid-resistant coat, either of black Japan or plastic sticker. Adams has also written a number of critical essays on the art of photography, including Beauty in Photography, Why People Photograph, and most recently Along Some Rivers. Among many awards, Adams has received the Guggenheim and MacArthur Foundation Fellowships, and in 2006 the Deutsche Botts Prize. In 2009 he was awarded the Hasselblad Foundation International Award in Photography, and in 2014 was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Letters. In the fall of 2010, Yale University Art Gallery organized an ambitious touring retrospective. This international multi-venue retrospective highlighted Adams' 4 decades of work. The retrospective began in Vancouver, British Columbia, and traveled to the Denver Art Museum, the Los Angeles Museum of Art, Museo Nacional, Centro de Arte Reina Sofia in Madrid, the National Media Museum in the United Kingdom, and the Jeu de Paume, Paris. Time 21. Now gently, carefully lower the etched block into the tray of the etchant acid. The general proportion timing is for 60 minutes for the deepest etched lines. We have to etch the block to the maximum possible point. Adams was one of the most prominent post-war British abstract artists alongside Victor Passmore, Kenneth and Mary Martin, Adrian Heath, Roger Hilton, Terry Frost, Anthony Hill, and William Scott. In 1949, Adams began teaching at the Central School of Art and Design in London, where he came into contact with Victor Passmore and his circle, which acted as a forum for constructivist ideas in Britain. Adam exhibited with them from 1951 to 1956, working mainly in metal sculpture. Unlike the rest of the group, however, he rejected both mathematical formulae and new materials in sculpture. Many of his works were in wood and were based on organic forms. He was nevertheless sympathetic to the group's aim of forging a link between art and architecture. While teaching at the Central School, Adams learned how to weld and in 1955 began to produce constructions of sheet and rod elements, as in tall spike forms, which showed the influence of Gonzalez and moved towards non-figuration. His work of the 1960s often used welded steel sheets, sometimes perforated, as in large screen form. 1962 London Tate. These were ideally to be displayed against a well-lit background so as to allow light to shine through. One can clearly trace the influence of such work on this screen print. Though he never lived in Cornwall, he visited and enjoyed good relations with many of the contemporary St. Ives artists. Sharing with many of them a provisional approach to constructivism. He contributed to the Panwith portfolio of 1973 to raise funds for the Panwith Galleries. Time 23:52. There is a possibility of air bubbles forming during the etching process, hence it is imperative one removes them using a feather or other such implement at the time the block is being etched. After each block, clean it properly. The paper to be used to print is kept soaked and blotted half an hour before the print is taken and should be damp with being printed for emboss print processes. Health and safety precautions. 1. Do not eat or drink close to work area to prevent accidental ingestion. 2. Familiarize yourself with substances that are hazardous. 3rd, clean hands thoroughly after working using baby oil, soap and water or a non-toxic hand cleaner. Keep work area clean and organized. 4. Ask your doctor if you are taking medication or pregnant about what precautions you should be taking. 5. Identify location of fire extinguishers, first aid box and eye wash stations. Ask your professor if need be. 6. Notify your professor about any health condition or medication that may affect you in that classroom. 7. Store concentrated nitric acid and potassium chloride separately from other chemicals. Whenever possible, use diluted acid. 8. Acid etching should be done with local exhaust ventilation. 9. An important safety rule when diluting concentrated acids is to add the acid to the water, never the reverse. 10. Application of grounds or stop spouts should be done with local exhaust ventilation, example slot or enclosed hood. 11. Wear appropriate gloves, goggles and protective apron or lab coat when handling acids. 12. If acid is spilled on your skin, wash with lots of water. In case of eye contact, rinse the eyes with water for at least 15 to 20 minutes and seek medical attention. Cover acid baths when not in use. 13. Be aware that embossing is a mechanical process that manipulates the paper stock, so by default it will also manipulate your design. 14. Keep sharp etching needles and tools in a safe box which can be locked and away from the children. Time 26:12. A final registration is made on the machine. Time 26:20. Take the final print on the ready damp paper without ink. Time 26:55. Make the addition on the paper. Time 27:40. Write all the details like date and signature on the print.